going over tonight's very, very big NHL slate. And as you may notice, this is broadcasting live. And one improvement that we plan on making is doing more of these slate previews live, just so that if people are inclined to come in early with some questions or comments or whatever, we don't do a lot of editing after the fact on these at all on these videos anyway. So there's really no reason to not make it available live. What we're going to hopefully do, again, I'd like to be able to put a scheduling thing on there where we know that every day it's going to be a certain time. But unfortunately, I don't do this full time, and this is not my job, so I can't guarantee when I'm going to be able to do this. So we're gonna try, but we'll see what happens as far as that goes. Now, with respect to the slate previews, we're going to continue to do it the same way, and we're going to take a look at the games in general. Then we're going to take a look at the sheets, see what plays look good. Then we're going to build a hand-built lineup, and then what we're going to do is we're going to do something a little different. We're going to do a couple of different Saber Sim builds to give you, first of all, give you an idea of what the slate could look like, and second of all, again, from a teaching perspective, to give you some tools to maybe, to help utilize the Saber Sim optimizer a little bit better, and not even that, but also to show you, especially with hockey, how if you tweak just something very, very small, it could change your entire build. But we'll get to that. So it's a very, very big slate. So what we're looking at here is the implied totals. This is Saber Sim here, which is you look at these. You have Boston with a 4.2, Tampa with a 3.9, Rangers almost a 4, Florida almost a 4, the Kings late night hammer right with a 4. So what that means to me is that you're going to see 1, 2, 3, maybe 5 teams. Oh man, Dallas as well. So, and then Calgary right behind them. So with the Calgary is interesting because Toronto's coming off a back-to-back where they played Edmonton last night in kind of an up and down affair. So their defense might be pretty bad tonight as well, Toronto. So Calgary could be an interesting play. Nonetheless, what I was saying is that there are a lot of options here. So there's no need to go like uber chalk, I believe, unless for some reason there are some plays that are just going to stand out. All right, so let's pull up my sheets and see what they look like here. And again, we're rating them by sheets value score. And the first thing that you'll notice is there's no huge kind of standout, but there is a one-off here that it might not even be a one-off. I mean, you could play him with some other guys from the Kings, and we'll get to that. But again, from a process perspective, again, I really believe this, and this is what I like doing. And listen, whether this is right or not, people ask what I do, so this is what I do. Is I will pull up these sheets and almost close my eyes, and it doesn't have to be now, but it could be like half hour before game time, and then open my eyes and look, right, and just visualize and say, okay, what's on this part of the page that's got the same team, right? Because that's kind of a simplified way of saying where can I find good, highly correlated plays. We want dudes from the same team that rate very well. Okay. Now, in a perfect world, we also want guys that are not only from the same team, that are also either on the same even strength line or the same power play line or both. Now, if you're a real perfect world, you would also want this ownership to be low as well. Okay. Now, again, that's kind of tough to get to, but I think you'll see it's interesting. Like the first thing I will actually notice is that the ownership is spread around pretty nicely here, with the exception of a couple of high-owned guys. I mean, you could get some pretty well projected, I think, low-owned stacks here, or lower-owned stacks. Like, look, the first thing I will notice is, these Boston guys all look good. At the top you have Pasternak, Bergeron, Marchand, whatever. But you got 10%, 18% for Bergeron, and 9% for Pasternak. I guess that's somewhat reasonable, I guess. I'm about to say it's too high-owned, but Kadri down here at 15%, that's the sort of sneaky, non-sneaky play of Calgary that I alluded to earlier. But the first thing aside from the Boston, I'll notice again is this King guy. You know, so Velarde, he's only at the third even strength line, but he's in the first power play line. So you could have Kempe, you play him at the power play, and you can play Fiala at the power play. And this is kind of risky because they're not on the same even strength line, but that's definitely like a good way to kind of start, you know. And then you could listen. You could take a couple of liberties projection wise. And now you could play Kopitar and kind of fill that out. Now you have a good 4-man stack with the Kings, and I think that's actually a pretty good way to start. Next thing I'll kind of notice here is Kaprizov, but he's kind of like all by himself at 8,200 and nobody else to pair with him. So from a construction perspective, I've been told by some very sharp players that you're not supposed to spend, use your one-off on a big time spend like that. So when I do my lineup builds, I'll be cognizant of that. I'm not going to say I'm going to exit out because if Saberson comes up with it, it's probably factored all that in, but it is something that I don't want to have too much of. So what else is showing up here? The Florida that I mentioned earlier, they're not showing up at all. The Rangers, we didn't even mention them, but they have Tarasenko, which is kind of a one-off here. So let's look at the Calgary. So Huberdeau, as I mentioned, he looks like he's only 3% in that Toronto game. So he's not on the first even strength line, but he's in the first power play line. So again, if we go down to here, Kadri as well, he's 2-1. And Lindholm is 1-1. So those three guys you could definitely use. So when we build hand builds, this is really what I'm looking at is just like these sheets, pair them together, put them with a good goalie, and just kind of roll. And so if I were going to hand build a lineup, I would really some combination of Boston, LA, and Calgary. And I think those build pretty naturally and fairly easily. So let's do that, as a matter of fact. Let's pull up the top shelf. And this is not going to be the actual lineup, but just to show you how we use these sheets to kind of let it roll here. Let's start with the Kings. And what did we say? You want to build a 4-man? We'll do Kopitar, Fiala, who's it, Kempe, and Velarde, right? He was the other guy. So if you play 4 of those, and then you play those Calgarys, you could probably do all this. So Kadri, Huberdeau, at only 3,800. Now we need a third guy. It's got to be a defenseman. So let's just take a look and see who from LA or from Calgary, for example, is decent. You have to go down quite a bit to find good defensemen today. Ekblad. Okay, so Uyghur works. Who else? Let's go by team. So let's just start with LA. So you'd have to play Drew Doughty. He's the only guy I have projecting right now. We'll have other guys, but he's right now. Who would I have to play? And he's on the 1-1. That's probably where I'm supposed to go. So it's either going to be him, or if we go to Calgary, it would be probably either Rasmus Anderson or Uyghur. So just for example, let's put in Rasmus Anderson. And then this becomes pretty easy, right? You play your favorite goalie, which is, for my money, with this much left, I could just play the top projected goalie if you want to know the truth. So let's just take a look at who that is. And then I remember there's a pretty good one-off there that I mentioned earlier. But let's pull this up. As far as goalies go, Marc-Andre Fleury at 8,700, that opens up a lot. So let's put him in. Marc-Andre Fleury. He's already probable. Now you got a $5,100 defenseman, which, just pick your favorite. So this is a very, very easy, and what this does, this does fade Boston, which is certainly nothing wrong with that. And that's something you could do. Listen, just for kicks though. Let's try to build that Boston lineup. I'm going to caution you on Boston as I do this. that, and I've been talking about this pretty much the whole, the last like 3 months, is, I mean, they're completely locked in, right? They're probably going to get the 1 seed, whatever it is. I don't see any reason why they should play all their guys like a zillion minutes. So, when these guys are chalky, it's probably a good idea to fade them. Pasternak, Bergeron, Marchand. Right, let's put these up here. Bergeron, Pasternak, Marchand. So if you wanted to do this, I mean, could you do it? I mean, probably, right? Is there anybody else from Boston I want to play? Forget that. Let's go straight to the Kings. I bet you can do this. It's not going to be easy, but well, I'll tell you who you could definitely do. You could definitely do it with some Calgary because you get to play Huberdeau at 3,800. That's for openers. And then you could play. You can almost get away with this. You can almost play like just the regular guys with Boston. It's not exactly perfect. I mean, you can play Uyghur, and now at 35.50 a man, you could make this work. Okay, it's not as smooth as the Kings one, but that's because Boston's great. That's why they're more expensive. So I think that you can get away with this by focusing on the Boston, the Calgary, and the Kings, and make it kind of work that way. So now we're going to have some fun. We're going to go into SaberSim, and we're going to build 2 different builds. First thing we're going to do is we are going to build with my projections, and then we're going to build with just SaberSims, just to give you an idea of how things can be different. So we're going to put in my projections here. Okay. We're going to exclude all other players, and we're going to build lineups. Want to build 150? We'll build 150 just for funsies. And let's just see what we would get by using ours. I imagine we would get a bunch of Kings. That's going to be my prediction, is that you get almost all of that 4,100 guy, and then it just makes things work too well. But let's just take a look. And then we're going to do one other thing. Yeah, so all this stuff. Ooh, look at this. What is all this? Moritz Seider. Detroit. Look at all this Detroit. Hello. What is this? This is not what I was expecting. I mean, all the Detroit. It does get a whole bunch of Calgary, but this is fun. I love playing Detroit. I might actually do this. Wowzer. Okay, interesting. Just before I forget, let me save this build. I mean, it sucks because it's going to be totally different by the end of the day, but we're going to save it anyway. Now the next thing I want to do 2 different types of builds. So this is hopefully this is going to be interesting. Hopefully maybe not. The next thing I want to do is I want to reset all, and then what we're going to do is we are going to upload my projections again, but we're going to make one change. What we're going to do is we are going to unclick exclude unlisted players, and what that does is this. SaberSim itself projects like a bunch of guys that are like 6 points or lower, because there are a lot of variations where those things come up. I don't usually project those. So that's why the guys I get are like a little more kind of standard. But if I include the unlisted players, for example, I just want to see the difference. Between the types of stacks we get. Oh, you know what I forgot to do? I'll go back to the original build and see what types of stacks we got, as opposed to what teams. Very important. Sorry about that. So we do it with this way. We allow all these other guys in. Now look what we get. Now we get all the Nashville and the Minnesota. You know what I mean? So it just depends on what parameters you kind of choose. That's why this is really just kind of an art, not a science. Now, in this particular build in card of stack types, we'd have to probably work on this a little bit because a lot of these are stacks I wouldn't want. You go back to this other build that I had before, and we look at stack types, and this is a little more pure, a little more few more 4-3s, a few more 5s. But even still, this I would want to do a little bit of work on. Okay. I don't know. I find that interesting that you get completely different teams depending on whether you use these 5-point projected guys or not. Now the next build I'll do, just to kind of show you, is now we'll just use the Saberson projections. So we're going to include everything, but we're not going to use ours. We got to make a couple of changes so the DraftKings doesn't get mad at us. And now we'll just do this again, 150. Okay. Build. And let's just see. And the reason I bring this up is because that's what's so cool about hockey. Everybody can start with like the same projections pretty much. But one little change and then one little, one little simulation that goes against you, and you're ending up with all kinds of Detroit. Like, for example. See here, look at this. Look at all this Boston. Where'd this come from? If we just go straight with the Saberson projection, we get all the Boston. And stack type still needs a little bit of work. So don't tell me that this is all about like software and programming and computers and not knowing the game. I mean, you gotta be really sharp about what information you feed into these things. Otherwise, you're gonna be very surprised with what you do, with what you end up with. So that's what I do every day. I do different types of builds and see what makes sense. Now I will say this: that if I do the same build. Well, if I do a build all 3 ways like I just did, and I get with the same types of teams, they're probably a lock. You know what I mean? When I say lock, I'm probably playing them. Let's put it that way. As of now, like if this slate landed in like a half an hour, I wouldn't have any idea what I was doing. I mean, I wouldn't know whether to play Detroit or the Kings or Calgary. One thing I might do is run like 150. With each build, and then if there are any dupes that come across with all 3, then I'll probably use those, because if all 3 different settings line up, it's probably good. And I've displayed this before, my dupe calculator, which I'll display that another time. But I have this tool that you put 500 lineups in, it'll tell you which one of them are the same, and get rid of them or identify them depending on what you want to do with it. In any case, that was kind of straying from what I usually do over here, but that'll pretty much do it. 6 o'clock, we're going to be live talking about this slate, big 10-game slate, and we'll do some more builds like that because that should be fun. All right, good luck, everybody.